Xi'an was once the capital of China for more than 13 dynasties. When Emperor Qin unified China, he declared Xi'an the capital. And he stowed away a little secret, buried hundreds of miles away from Xi'an, that lay dormant for over 2,000 years. To guard him in the afterlife, the emperor ordered the creation of a vast underground army, the Terracotta Warriors. Thousands of life-size soldiers, horses, chariots, each one unique, each one a silent sentinel of a dead king's dream of immortality. So, we've made it to the Terracotta Warrior, or at least we're about to. It is about a 5-10 minute walk from the entrance, and I would recommend getting their little guide. It's only 40 yuan. And they have it in English so that you can hear all the information. What's interesting about Terracotta Warriors is the fact that it predates the birth of Christ for about 200 years. So they were all constructed around 200 BCE and have remained buried for most of the time until 1975, where they were digging a well, like some farmers or peasants were digging a well in China, and ended up finding pieces of ceramics of one of the statues. Upon notifying the local government, they decided to excavate and found out that it is a historic site. So basically it remained preserved for about 2,100 years. There are about 600 pits spanning a total of 30 square miles, and we've only dug up about 5 of the pits. Shishi. What's also cool is everything in China is passport controlled. So effectively you don't need like e-tickets, you don't need paper tickets. It's all just scan your passport and your passport is your ticket. You don't need to like worry about, do I have this with me? Do I have that with me? No, it's all just with you at all times as long as you keep your passport with you. We're gonna check out pit 1 right now, then go to pit 3 and pit 2. Out of all the pits they have dug up, 1 is the best preserved, 3 is in its original state since they are still excavating to this day. And then 2 is mildly well preserved. So what's really interesting about the way they excavate them and restore them is a lot of them have been discovered in pieces. So they remove the pieces from the area and tag the area with a tag and a number. And then at a later different place, they are assembled together based on color and based on shape of the cracks. The cracks are then filled in with glue and painted over to give a seamless appearance of as if they were never cracked. Out there in the distance, you can see the original logs and wooden framing that held up the pits and the columns. protecting the soldiers from being crushed by the weight of the earth above them. So far, about 2,000 have been discovered and rebuilt. They estimate the number of soldiers somewhere around 10,000, if not more. So if you can see the plastic containers, that's where they would store the pieces that they excavate and then assemble them around here. You can see that one in pieces being matched and assembled. Around the area they have found so far 6 kilns, brick kilns, where they would fire the soldiers on site and then place them in their columns. So far the master kiln has not been found. And as you can see there and there, bricks were used to hold up the earth above them, which typically at the time bricks were not used for buildings, rather they were used for paving the ground. What's also interesting is they have found evidence of woven straw mats or tatami mats used to cover the soldiers to prevent dirt and earth seeping into the cavern when they were buried. These were about 10 by 10 meters and about 4 to 5 inches thick, made out of woven bamboo and reeds and straw. Also, as I was saying before, you can see the tags on the soldiers signifying the area that they're from, and that's how they used to catalog the area of like where they are buried, or where they were buried and excavated from. Another interesting fact that has been discovered about the warriors is on their feet there is stamped different characters. These have been identified as the name and location of the creators. So far, about 200 creators have been found, or artisans, each from different regions of China, some from the Emperor's Palace, and some even as far as near the region of Hong Kong and Shanghai, came here to work on the warriors. Also, there are 23 different areas, these little cubes, where archaeologists have dug and uncovered the soldiers. Below this section that we can see here, there is estimated to be 4 or 5 columns of soldiers and their remains. They go through the entire thing, excavating it down and assembling them on top. When all of them have been excavated, that area is marked as completed and excavated down, and then the soldiers placed back where they came from. So this is pit number 3, and it is considered one of the smallest pits. Based on the orientation of the soldiers discovered, archaeologists believe that this was a meeting room as opposed to a military formation. What is interesting is there's only 67 soldiers in here, 4 horses, and 1 horse-drawn wooden chariot. They also discovered a lot of bronze weapons, as each of the soldiers were buried with bronze spears, swords, shields, and other weapons. So all of the soldiers, when they were buried in actual military formation. Pit 3, being located at the back of the formation, was considered a meeting hall, where you not only had soldiers, clay soldiers, but you had clay non-soldier figures. For example, like an aristocrat or an advisor. So they believe this is where they concluded on strategy, strategy, and a bunch of other stuff. Another interesting fact is the entirety of the Terracotta Army was built at a time of peace. This is primarily due to the way the military structure existed back in the day. Was at a time of peace, the military was commanded by the emperor. However, at a time of war, they were commanded by commanders and generals. So far, no generals have been unearthed, therefore giving the approximate date of 230 BCE, which was a time of peace in this dynasty. So this is Pit 2. The formation structure and orientation is very similar to Pit 1. However, unlike Pit 1, this one features a different amount and different type of soldiers. You have archers, cavalrymen, spearmen, whereas Pit 1 has only been spearmen and swordsmen. So another interesting thing is, out of all the pits excavated, pit number 2 has been the only pit to include archers and cavalrymen. Neither pit 3 nor 4 has included any other type. If you can see the ridges over there, those ridges have been the evidence that they used bamboo mats and bamboo tatami mats to prevent the dirt getting in. They would lay bamboo stalks across the caverns and then mats on top to prevent the dirt from entering the trenches once the soldiers were buried. Another really interesting fact is they incorporated about 2 different types of archers. They had crossbowmen, which were the kneeling archers, and those were scattered around the formation, whereas the bulk of the formation of archers were standing archers, typically longbowmen. We have made our way to the museum, which contains a lot of the original soldiers, much better preserved or much better restored than the ones you see out in the pits. This allows us to get a better look at them and see them in greater detail. A lot of these soldiers were constructed over the course of months, if not close to a year. Here you can see where the clay is prepared to make the feet and the base using coils, and then assembled and made full by artisans. Then you would have the sculptors come in and apply the details of the face. It is said that each soldier is unique and represents a real soldier in the army at the time. They are also solid from the ground up to about the hips. This allows them for a lower center of gravity, not tip over. The bodies are made solid as they are the thicker parts and would likely crack or take close to multiple months to dry out. As you can see, some of the original colors are preserved, as you can see in the bows holding the shoes together. Also the fasteners on the armor here. Now, who was the emperor that built this army and why is he significant? Emperor Qin was the emperor who unified the 6 districts of China into a more modern / more accurate depiction of China today. He also went as far as standardizing roads, 3 different types, where you had one for horse-drawn carriages, which would allow for shipping lanes and distribution, and for the transport of more wealthy or important people. He also had riding roads in between cities for shorter distance travel where people could ride horses in between cities. And lastly, he standardized walkways. Another thing he oversaw was the standardization of measurements for the use of construction. This allowed China to have water delivery systems and aqueducts/waste removal that predate Europe by a couple hundred years. Albeit the Romans also had water distribution systems in the form of aqueducts, China had underwater distribution systems of water due to the standardization of measurements, which allowed for the construction of clay pipes. Over here we have the original bronze weaponry that was found with the soldiers, and even the wooden shaft of one of the spears found with the soldiers. The crossbow was recreated to represent what their crossbow looked like back then. However, the bronze mechanisms that were found are original, as you can see there. They also used to use bronze arrows for the crossbows and bows. Me being a huge history nerd and a ceramicist, this is like my dream come true to check this area out. Outside of traveling, I am a potter, so seeing how people sculpted and made pottery back in the day, and seeing how they made over 100,000 soldiers, 6,000 which have been discovered, is just astonishing, the scale of that.
So they had a really nice display that showed off exactly how some of the statues were made and the different positions they found them in. They did have like some sort of captions, but unfortunately they were in Mandarin and I can't read Mandarin yet. So because of China's trade via the Silk Road with a lot of other nations at the time, primarily those in the Middle East, they did have a lot of Middle Eastern artifacts from the nation of Assyria. So in the basement of the previous building I was just in, they had this exhibit which gave a lot of historical insight into the connection between the two cultures and how they exchanged cultural elements and ideas from each other. It even went as far as showing like certain pottery types or certain art types and how they were similar in nature based on their long history of interaction with each other.
So what I didn't expect to find, and it kind of does make sense that I find it here, was an entire exhibit on history of Syria and, well, the ancient history of Syria. Apparently, at the time, China and Syria were huge trade partners via the Silk Roads, alongside with Egypt and the Roman Empire itself. There was a lot of cross-trade between the two. Even through the rule of the Persians in Assyria, they remained trade partners with China at the time. which now it makes sense of how China has an Uyghur population, a Chinese Muslim population, due to, at the time, the trade routes between those countries. Therefore, the exchange of culture and religion. So, in typical fashion, I picked up some sweets to try. Chinese Oreos. Oh my God, that's good. So after checking out the Terracotta Warriors, you come across this little area that has a lot of little shops. What I would recommend, pomegranate juice. They make it fresh, and then you can also haggle on the prices. Keep in mind, not everything is a fixed price. If they say 20, offer 10, offer 15. You're still overpaying, but like, at least you're not overpaying by a lot.
So after checking out the Terracotta Warriors, we decided to go to Emperor Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum. This is the actual burial site of Emperor Qin, and while he is buried here, they have never uncovered the grave out of respect for him. They have dug around and opened some of the boxes which contain bronze statues of the horses and the chariots he was buried with. Entrance for this was about $5 per person, including tickets for the bus, which is nice because otherwise you'd probably be walking about 15 to 20 minutes on an incline to get to the top where the museum is. And there's about 4 different museums here, and each one is spread out about a 10-minute walk.
So we've come to the tomb / mausoleum to check out some of the other pits. This one was devoid of any terracotta soldiers. However, this one is believed to be either an entrance to the tomb of the emperor or a bathhouse. The reason why bathhouse is you have a lot of half-naked statues of men. However, this could have also been a production workshop where the artisans themselves had statues made of themselves. In usual fashion, I've got to see everything. So we've made it out to where they found the bronze chariots. So originally when they buried the chariot, they entombed it in a wooden crate to protect everything inside. Over 2,000 years, the wood had since decayed, leading to the burial of it. It took roughly about 8 years to restore it back to all of it in one piece. So right now, we're over there. Earlier in the day, we were on the other side of this hill over here, where there's 1, 2, and 3 pits. So after the unification of China, chariots became more common. However, only the best and the most exquisite of chariots were reserved for the emperor. These chariots were made out of entirely bronze and featured armor. It also featured a crossbow and mountable shields that you could detach and use to fight off any attackers. Another interesting thing is it featured ventilation holes to allow for breathability. Because of the weight of this, being out of solid bronze, you needed about 4 to 6 horses to draw this. The really interesting thing is you had multiple types of chariots. This one was made for infantrymen to protect the main chariot itself. You also had smaller mounted chariots that would allow for melee weapons to be used.
So I don't know what happened. I must have hit take picture instead of record. So I don't have any footage of me showing off the bronze chariots and the stagecoach. However, I do have pictures that I took. And previously I was talking about the chariots. They do have a small model of them. However, these are the full-sized ones, and the horses are life-size, the people are life-size, the chariot's actually like realistically sized. It is absolutely astonishing to see how much detail they put into these chariots and the size of these chariots. I mean, all of this exhibit and all of what I saw today was just amazing. The level of artistry needed to do this is unbelievable. And just as always, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you liked, tell me what you didn't. The next vlog that's going to come out is basically the last day in Xi'an, after I got back from the Terracotta Warriors, checking out the other little night markets, and then walking around the city walls and checking out the ancient city of Xi'an. That should be out in a week or two, and I will see you in the next video.